The Gulag system, often perceived as isolated camps, was in fact a sprawling network of state-managed facilities. By the 1930s, it encompassed thousands of locations, each meticulously organized within a bureaucratic framework. This was not mere punishment, it was a calculated mechanism of control, woven into the fabric of governance. At the heart of this system were ministries and quotas, dictating the flow of prisoners like a factory assembly line. Each camp operated under strict reporting chains where numbers replaced names and human lives were reduced to mere statistics. The machinery of suffering was methodical, not chaotic. The Gulag was embedded in everyday governance, a chilling reminder of how cruelty can become normalized. It functioned under the guise of order, with its operations hidden behind bureaucratic language and official seals. Here, suffering was not an accident, it was a planned outcome. In this labyrinth of oppression, the state wielded power through fear and compliance. The Gulag was not just a collection of camps, it was a centralized system designed to instill terror across society. The threat of arrest loomed large, creating an atmosphere of paranoia. Maps and files tell a story of systematic cruelty, where the human cost was overshadowed by administrative efficiency. The Gulag's reach extended into every corner of life, ensuring that dissent was met with swift retribution. It was a chilling example of how governance can morph into tyranny. The sheer scale of the Gulag system was staggering, with millions of lives affected. Each camp operated under the same grim principles, driven by quotas that demanded compliance and productivity. This was not merely punishment, it was a mechanism of state control. Behind the walls of these camps, suffering was meticulously catalogued. The state maintained records of every prisoner, reducing their existence to numbers in a ledger. This bureaucratic approach to cruelty made it all the more insidious, as it stripped away individual identity. As the system expanded, so did its methods. The Gulag became a tool of social engineering, where fear and compliance were cultivated through meticulous planning. The state's grip tightened, and the line between justice and punishment blurred. The question remains, how does cruelty become routine? As the Gulag system evolved, it transformed from a series of isolated camps into a pervasive network of oppression embedded in the very structure of society. This chilling transformation invites deeper examination. To understand the Gulag is to confront the unsettling reality of a system that thrived on human suffering. It challenges us to reflect on the mechanisms of power and the ways in which society can normalize cruelty. What does it take for a society to accept such a system? In the early 1930s, the Soviet Union's legal landscape shifted dramatically. Article 58 transformed ordinary citizens into potential criminals, allowing authorities to label dissent as sabotage. Accusations became the currency of fear, where guilt was often determined by arbitrary standards rather than actual deeds. Denunciations were rampant, often fueled by personal grievances or political ambition. Neighbors turned against each other, and the fear of being reported loomed large. A simple disagreement could lead to a knock on the door, sealing the fate of the accused. Prisoners like Mikhail, a middle-aged man with dark hair and a weary face, found themselves ensnared in a web of paperwork. His only crime was being in the wrong place at the wrong time, a statistic in a system hungry for numbers. The interrogation rooms were stark and cold, designed to instill compliance rather than seek truth. Officers wielded power through intimidation, demanding confessions that served as mere formalities, closing cases rather than uncovering facts. Under the weight of pressure, many prisoners, including Mikhail, confessed to crimes they never committed. Their signatures marked the end of an investigation, but the beginning of a nightmare, where guilt was a formality and innocence was irrelevant. The system thrived on quotas, each arrest contributing to a chilling statistic. Law enforcement was less about justice and more about meeting targets, creating a chilling atmosphere where lives were reduced to mere numbers on a ledger. Families were left in turmoil, grappling with the sudden disappearance of loved ones. Mikhail's wife, with a worried expression and unkempt hair, searched for answers, her desperation growing as the days turned into weeks. As arrests escalated, the fabric of society began to fray. People learned to conform, censoring their thoughts and actions to avoid the watchful eyes of their neighbors. Compliance became a survival tactic in a climate of fear. The Gulag system operated like a well-oiled machine, where each arrest was a cog in the larger apparatus of oppression. For many, the crime was simply existing in a world that deemed them expendable. As the system continued to tighten its grip, the question lingered: how many more lives would be claimed by this bureaucratic cruelty? The machinery of oppression was relentless, and the cycle of fear showed no signs of abating. As prisoners are uprooted from their homes, the journey begins in cramped transit prisons. Each individual, stripped of identity, becomes a mere number in a ledger. Families are torn apart, and fear grips the air, thick and suffocating. The prisoners are herded into overcrowded boxcars, where the stench of sweat and despair clings to the air. Days stretch into weeks, with no food or water, and the sound of rattling metal echoes their hopelessness. Inside the boxcars, hunger gnaws at their insides. The weak grow weaker, and the strong are forced to make impossible choices. Each day, the line between survival and surrender blurs further. As the train lurches forward, the prisoners are enveloped in confusion. They have no knowledge of their destination, only the relentless motion that strips them of agency. Each jolt reminds them of their powerlessness. The journey is punctuated by stops at desolate stations, where guards bark orders and new prisoners are added to the already crowded cars. The sense of dislocation deepens with every passing hour. Disease spreads like wildfire in the cramped quarters. Coughs and fevers become the soundtrack of their journey, as the once vibrant individuals begin to fade into shadows of their former selves. As they travel deeper into the unknown, the prisoners cling to fragments of their identities. Names are replaced by numbers, and memories of home become distant echoes, fading into the relentless rhythm of the train. The relentless motion of the train serves as a cruel reminder of their new reality. Each mile traveled strips them of hope, reinforcing the system's brutal efficiency in erasing individuality. With every passing day, the prisoners learn that survival is no longer tied to innocence. Endurance becomes their only ally as they brace themselves for the unknown fate awaiting them. As the train approaches its destination, a sense of dread fills the air. The promise of arrival looms, but for the prisoners, it is merely the beginning of a new chapter in their harrowing journey. As prisoners disembarked from the crowded boxcars, they were met with the stark reality of their new existence. Each individual was stripped of identity, reduced to a mere number in a vast ledger. The cold air was filled with uncertainty, and the sounds of heavy boots echoed against the iron gates of the camp. Upon arrival, a team of guards began the grim task of classification. They scrutinized each prisoner, assessing physical attributes and perceived loyalty. Strong men were marked for labor, while the frail were deemed expendable, their fates sealed by arbitrary judgment. Among the newly arrived, a middle-aged engineer named Alexei stood out. His dark hair was streaked with gray, and deep lines etched his face, revealing years of hardship. He was measured not for his intellect, but for his strength, as the guards decided his fate. Classification was not merely a process. It was a calculation of life expectancy. Those deemed capable were assigned to labor camps where survival chances were higher, while the weak were sent to remote locations, their lives reduced to mere statistics. The system operated with chilling efficiency. Engineers like Alexei were sent to work on vital infrastructure, while those labeled as unfit were dispatched to menial tasks, often leading to their demise. The value of a life was calculated in labor hours. As days turned into weeks, the harsh realities of the Gulag began to take their toll. Alexei's hands grew calloused, and his once strong frame began to wither. The constant fear of being deemed unfit weighed heavily on every prisoner. The guards maintained meticulous records, documenting each prisoner's productivity and health. A simple slip in performance could lead to reclassification, sending individuals to harsher conditions or worse. The stakes were high, and survival was a daily gamble. Prisoners learned to navigate this perilous system, often hiding their weaknesses to avoid being marked for expendable labor. The fear of being reclassified became a constant companion, shaping their every decision and action. Alexei witnessed the transformation of his fellow prisoners. Once proud men became shadows of themselves, their spirits crushed under the weight of classification. The system did not just assign labor, it stripped away humanity. As the sun dipped below the horizon, casting long shadows across the camp, the reality of their existence became painfully clear. Each day was a struggle for survival, and the classification system loomed over them, dictating their fates. The Gulag system was not merely a place of confinement, it was a vital cog in the Soviet economy. Camp commanders meticulously calculated production quotas, treating human lives as expendable resources in a larger industrial machine. Timber, coal, and gold extracted from the camps fueled the Soviet Union's ambitious industrialization efforts. Each resource was logged, reported, and valued, while the suffering of the workers remained an invisible cost. As the economy thrived, the camps became a source of cheap labor. The authorities anticipated death rates as a mere statistic, integrating loss into their calculations like any other budgetary item. Prisoners were assigned to specific tasks based on their perceived value. Stronger individuals were sent to physically demanding jobs, while the weak faced the grim fate of expendable labor, often leading to their demise. Camp commanders balanced productivity against attrition, ensuring that output remained high even as lives were lost. This cold calculus underscored the grim reality. Human suffering was a mere line item. The camps produced infrastructure critical to the Soviet state, including railroads and canals. Each project was a testament to the efficiency of exploitation, where human lives were sacrificed for progress. Reports of productivity were prioritized over the well-being of the prisoners. The system thrived on the illusion of progress, masking the brutal reality of life within the camps. Despite the harsh conditions, the Gulag system was seen as a necessary evil for the Soviet economy. It became a paradox where suffering was not only tolerated but budgeted for. The Gulag's economic role extended beyond mere labor. It became a tool for social control, instilling fear in the populace and ensuring compliance with the state's demands. As the system continued to function, the line between survival and suffering blurred. The Gulag thrived on this ambiguity, where life was cheap and productivity reigned supreme. Beyond the barbed wire, the specter of the Gulag loomed large, casting a shadow over society. The mere knowledge of arbitrary arrests instilled a pervasive fear, compelling citizens to conform to the state's expectations. Initiative became a dangerous gamble, and silence transformed into a refuge. Families learned to navigate this treacherous landscape, self-censoring conversations and avoiding topics that could attract unwanted attention. The walls of their homes became echo chambers of fear, where even whispers could betray them to the authorities. In workplaces, the atmosphere thickened with suspicion. Colleagues became wary of one another, each person an unwitting potential informant. The threat of denunciation loomed, creating an environment where loyalty to the state overshadowed camaraderie. Neighbors, once friends, turned into vigilant observers, scrutinizing each other's actions for signs of dissent. The pervasive fear transformed communities into tightly controlled microcosms, where any deviation from the norm could lead to dire consequences. The Gulag's influence extended beyond its physical confines, shaping the very fabric of daily life. The unspoken threat of imprisonment became a tool of social control, ensuring compliance through fear rather than overt brutality. In this climate of apprehension, the state crafted an image of omnipotence. The arbitrary nature of arrests meant that anyone could vanish without warning, reinforcing the idea that no one was truly safe from the Gulag's reach. Children grew up under this shadow, their childhoods marked by the unspoken rules of silence and compliance. The lessons of fear became ingrained, shaping their understanding of authority and obedience from an early age. As the years passed, the Gulag's legacy of fear transformed societal norms. People learned to accept their circumstances, adapting to a reality where questioning the state was synonymous with courting disaster. The Gulag's grip on society was not merely about punishment, it was about creating a culture of compliance. The camps served as a chilling reminder that dissent could lead to erasure, both from society and memory. In this environment, the line between survival and complicity blurred. As fear reigned, the question remained, how long could this system endure, and what would it take to shatter the silence that enveloped the nation? The Gulag system thrived in the shadows, hidden from public scrutiny. Camps were often renamed or relocated, erasing their existence from official maps. This deliberate obscurity allowed the regime to operate without accountability, crafting a narrative of invisibility around its brutal reality. Letters sent from prisoners were meticulously filtered, with any mention of suffering or discontent removed before reaching their families. This censorship created a false sense of normalcy, shielding the public from the grim truths of the camps. Released prisoners faced strict prohibitions against discussing their experiences. Fear of rearrest silenced many, ensuring that the horrors of the Gulag remained largely unspoken. This culture of silence perpetuated the system's power. The state maintained control through a network of informants, ensuring that any dissent was swiftly reported. Neighbors watched each other closely, creating an atmosphere of paranoia that stifled any potential rebellion. Censorship extended to the media, with reports of camp conditions sanitized or entirely omitted. The regime crafted a narrative that portrayed the Gulag as a necessary evil, a tool for national security rather than a site of suffering. As camps were relocated, their histories were rewritten. New names and purposes obscured the brutal realities of their past, allowing the regime to erase the evidence of its cruelty from collective memory. The lack of visibility extended to the deaths within the camps. Casualty figures were often underreported, minimizing the human cost of the Gulag. This systematic erasure of life was a chilling aspect of the regime's efficiency. The regime's ability to operate in secrecy was a cornerstone of its power. By controlling the narrative and suppressing dissent, the state ensured that the Gulag remained a hidden reality for most citizens. In the absence of accountability, the Gulag became a self-sustaining entity. Its existence was justified through a narrative of necessity, allowing the state to perpetuate its policies without fear of exposure. As the system continued to thrive in secrecy, the question remained, how long could such a web of lies endure? The fate of countless lives hung in the balance, waiting for a moment when the truth could no longer be contained. The Gulag system thrived on its bureaucratic machinery, where each guard, clerk, and official operated within a rigid framework. Their actions, devoid of personal ideology, became cogs in a relentless machine. The daily grind of paperwork and quotas overshadowed the humanity of those trapped within its gears, rendering suffering a mere statistic in a ledger. Prisoners became interchangeable parts, categorized and assigned roles based on their perceived value. The system stripped them of individuality, reducing lives to mere numbers on a spreadsheet. In this cold calculus, the Gulag's machinery operated smoothly, indifferent to the human cost, as survival hinged on compliance and productivity. As the years progressed, the machinery of the Gulag evolved, becoming more efficient in its cruelty. Guards followed orders without question, their faces hardened by routine. For them, the act of punishment became normalized, a daily task devoid of moral reflection. The system's brutality was masked by its organization. The Gulag's economic role within the Soviet Union further entrenched its existence. The camps produced essential resources, fueling industrial growth while absorbing the losses of human life. This grim calculus of labor ensured that the system remained profitable, perpetuating its cycle of exploitation and suffering. The machinery of the Gulag extended beyond its physical boundaries. Fear permeated society, creating a culture of silence and compliance. Families learned to navigate their lives under the shadow of the camps, self-censoring their thoughts and actions to avoid the arbitrary grasp of the state. The normalization of cruelty was not merely a byproduct of the system, it was its foundation. The Gulag thrived on the acceptance of suffering as routine, where the inhumane became ordinary. This pervasive acceptance ensured that the machine continued to operate, consuming lives without remorse. Even as the world outside evolved, the Gulag remained a constant, a dark symbol of state power. Its infrastructure, built on secrecy and fear, became a blueprint for oppression. The system's resilience lay in its ability to adapt while remaining hidden in plain sight. The legacy of the Gulag is one of profound suffering, yet it also serves as a cautionary tale. The machinery that devoured lives was not fueled by hatred but by a chilling efficiency. The system's organization allowed it to persist, a reminder of how cruelty can become institutionalized. As the last remnants of the Gulag fade from memory, the lessons endure. The danger lies not in overt violence, but in the normalization of suffering within structured systems. History warns us that the most dangerous regimes often disguise their brutality behind a facade of order. In the end, the Gulag serves as a stark reminder of the human capacity for complicity and cruelty. Its legacy challenges us to remain vigilant against systems that prioritize efficiency over empathy, urging us to remember those who suffered within its relentless machinery.